So I put together just a very rudimentary PowerPoint with some examples, as well as a Google Drive link that I put in the chat that just has some resources that I've compiled over time, emails that I put together and proclamation requests that I put together and all sorts of things. So feel free to use all of that. For those of you who are going to be watching on the replay, it's linked and I'll link it in the comment notes too. And I just want to make sure that none of this is like gate kept, right? Like it's really tragic sometimes that people are doing stuff and you don't know what they're doing and you want to do it because you have such good ideas too. So not saying that I have all the best ideas. I want to clarify, that's not what I'm saying. These are just some ideas that things that I've done throughout my time. I've competed off and on since 2013 as a teen and now a miss, and I'm in my final year. So I've done some stuff I think is kind of cool. I want everyone to do cool stuff, whatever it is, with their own spin. So these are just some kind of cool ideas. Can we see the screen? Thumbs up. Cool. Awesome. So yeah, I'm Sierra. I'm an advocate for STEAM, equity, entrepreneurship, innovation, all sorts of fun things. And I've been able to provide testimony at the state legislature. I've been able to advocate in DC for various causes. I've been able to get proclamations signed year over year. And I wanna share that knowledge. I want you to be able to do really cool advocacy things too. And I want to share best practices. So feel free to jump in if you have thoughts, if you have questions. This is a sharing time. It's not a lecture time. So feel free to engage. So real quick, like I said, we're going to keep it short so we can all go to bed at a reasonable hour. I do want to talk, kind of break it down local, state, national, and then kind of go through a brainstorming questions. So locally, I think the first thing is to get to know who's representing you. So I've listed out a handful of contacts that have various roles in local government, in local representation. Get to know, if you don't know, who your mayor, your city commissioners are, find out those people, find out their email addresses. Same with city clerks, same with all of the people, school board reps, county commissioners or parish commissioners. Find out who runs the Chamber of Commerce, find out who runs the downtown Main Street organizations. Not all of them are technically political organizations, right? But they are economic development. They do have a vested interest in the community, very civically minded organizations. And often there are civic groups that are connected to your cause that you can partner with right locally. The reason I wanted to start with local, one, it's relatively easy to get your foot in the door locally. And yes, super cool to make waves at the national level, right? Like to say, we're doing stuff across the country. But a lot of change can happen quickly at the local level. And I really want to empower others to make sure they know that they can make change right in their own literal backyard. So don't overlook local advocacy. Don't overlook your mayor and your city commissioners and your city clerks, because they're the ones who keep things running every day. So I have some just action ideas over on the side, how you can engage civically and locally. You know, you can get a city or a countywide proclamation for your social impact initiative. And again, in that Google Drive file, I have an example of when I was Miss Augusta, a proclamation that I had made supporting Women in STEAM Week, a whole week dedicated to celebrating women in STEAM. You can participate in a local government day. Usually there's some kind of event that happens for high schoolers or middle schoolers or all K through 12 where they learn about local government. And I'm sure they would really love to have a relatively young representative in the community engage with that too, to not only get to know the students who are wanting to be civically minded, but also the representatives I mentioned before. They're actively looking out their constituents and they want to get to know you and they want to know what you're supporting. So reaching out, participating in local government day, promoting local elections or registration drives or things that are civically minded. A lot of getting engaged locally is, we just kind of heard from about the fundraising thing. It's give and take, right? Like offer things that you can get in, like before you ask for things, you want to offer, hey, I can promote you on social media. The same is true with governmental and advocacy things like, hey, I'm really passionate about getting students XYZ. And you can find a connection with your local government who's really passionate about getting students signed up to vote. You can say, look, let's work together on this. And it's that give and take relationship. You can also, I noted the travel and tourism departments and convention and visitors bureau that usually occur, like there's something like that in every community, very passionate about economic development. They want to promote their town or their county. So if you're looking for ad pages or salute pages or auction items, you can get in contact with these CVBs or tourism departments or whatever they're called. And they have stuff that they want to give, and they have budgets for advertising, and they can help you in your advocacy if it lines up with bringing people to your town, if it lines up with getting positive press for the community. That's what they're all about. You can also do something, actually, Courtney Price Dukes just recently spoke during public comments to highlight issues that were important to her during a public comment section during a county commission meeting. Right? Am I right, Courtney? I think so.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Yeah. So you can share every open meeting, not every meeting's open, but oftentimes city and government and county meetings are open forums where anyone can go. You can sit in a meeting, you can see the agenda beforehand, you can know what issues are going to come up. And there's almost always a public comment section. So you can either sign up in advance by emailing your city clerk. It's important to have their email. Asking them if you would be able to speak, just to introduce yourself, like, hi, I'm Sierra, I'm Miss Butler County, and I'm very passionate about STEAM education. I'd like to introduce myself to the county commission. It's an easy email, just send it off to the city clerk or the county administrator. We have so many opportunities as title holders, but even more so as just engaged individuals in our community, that people are so excited to hear from us and to hear what we're doing. So take advantage of that and just send an email. That's why I put the email templates in there. Feel free to literally plagiarize me, just insert your own name, of course. But these are opportunities just to get connected locally, because that is, in my experience, where like 80% of change is made. So any thoughts on local advocacy, local actions, or any experiences maybe that anyone's had that they want to share?
I can go ahead and share. I actually recently, I am about to graduate with my doctor of pharmacy in May. And so my social impact initiative is based around medication safety. And there's a bill in New Hampshire right now that wants to abolish the prescription affordability committee. And I actually was able to submit a testimony to oppose this bill and had heard back from a couple of representatives. So super cool. They didn't have a in-person meeting because of COVID and all the craziness, but yeah, it was super interesting. And to hear back from some of the representatives was also amazing. And they were just kind of like, even it was something so simple, like, thank you for your insight, like as a professional. So super cool.
Absolutely.
It definitely made an impact for sure.
Good. That, I think, like I said, I think local government advocacy sometimes gets so forgotten, but there's so much change that can be, like, your story made an impact. And I think that's so important, that we can do that. And that kind of ties in going into the state advocacy part, right? Like everyone has House representatives in your own district for your state legislature, right? You have senators for your district for your state legislature. Get to know them. It's their job to listen to you and to hear what you have to say and hear about your opinions, as all of their constituents, right? So get to know who your House representatives are, who your state representatives are for your state legislature. Get to know who your state board of education committee member is, or departments that relate to you, if it's Department of Travel and Tourism or Wildlife and Parks or any of the governmental departments. There is someone there whose job is to figure out partnerships, figure out sponsorships, figure out opportunities to connect with our generation and to listen to us. So I highly recommend making like a spreadsheet and just doing a little bit of research, figuring out all of these contact people and finding their emails, because they're government workers. They're usually very accessible email addresses that you can find, and just send an introductory email and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. I'd love to work with you to do XYZ. It does not have to be a hard email. But this can open doors to giving testimony about something you either support or you're against, or maybe you're neutral on and you just want to say, I like bits and pieces of this and don't like other pieces of it, for a cause that you're passionate about. In the Google Drive, there's an example from a organization here in Kansas called Thrive Allen County, and they were working on advocating in support of a bill that eliminates the Kansas food sales tax. We have one of the highest food sale taxes in the country. And so they were eliciting constituents to give their testimony if it was support or against or neutral. And it's a template that breaks down the process for that. And there's a lot of really great tips and even an example testimony in there. And I'm going to submit, it sounds fancy. I'm going to put in my testimony for a bill that I recently testified in support of, which for Kansas, it was House Bill 2466, which was all about computer science education. So it'll be another example that you can look to if you're invited to give testimony, or if you just happen to be up to date on a bill that's being presented in your state that you're really passionate about, it aligns with your social impact, or maybe it doesn't, and you're just really passionate about food sales tax. You can set up that testimony emailing the House committee person who is over the congressional committee, or you can partner with groups that are already lobbying in support of different bills and things that are going in front of Congress. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Like there's already advocacy groups and lobbying groups out there who are working that you can partner with and add your story, add your connection point to tell your representative, because when we go as a group to advocate, it adds a little more flavor, right? Like we add more, there's strength in numbers, but there's the opportunity to connect with your individual legislature representative person who maybe wasn't going to be contacted about this because there wasn't a constituent who had a story to tell. So definitely stay up to date on the bills being presented. Check out different groups that are lobbying. I put a link here and it's in the Google Drive too. That is a link to all the different state legislature websites. So this is where you can find email addresses for your representatives and your senators and their staff members, which is a pretty important person to get in contact with. They're the ones you'll actually be emailing in most cases. And you can set up meetings with them. You can set up meetings with your representatives just to say, again, I'm Sierra. I'm a constituent who's super passionate about education equity. I'd like to talk to you about that. And again, it's their job, but they also really love to hear from constituents. So that's one way to do it. Access the state legislature websites. Usually, like for Kansas, I think it's kansas.gov. So if you just Google around, I'm sure you can find your legislature website. I also put in the Google Drive an example of a governor's proclamation. So I know this is one that people often look at and they're like, oh, I absolutely want to get a governor's proclamation to recognize whatever. I put an example, the whole form that I filled out in order to get a governor's proclamation. It is a relatively lengthy process in Kansas anyway, and I'm assuming it's probably the same nationally, where it takes about like 6 to 8 weeks to process, to get approved, to set up a date where this governor is going to sign it, yada, yada, yada. But that document in there details my template that I used to create. It also fills out all the questions that I was asked when I was applying for a governor's proclamation. But those are really fun to do. Those are a really great way to raise awareness for your cause or an organization that you're partnering with, or a chance to highlight on social media your advocacy work and all the sorts of things that go along with governor's proclamations. Again, if you don't know what you want to get a governor's proclamation for, find a group that you're with or that you can partner with that is already going to say it is Black History Month, right? And I want to support equity and underrepresentation, highlighting underrepresented groups. So I want to partner with my local organizations that are already getting a governor's proclamation for Black History Month. That's something you can do, you can tag along with, and you may make some new connections while you're part of that advocacy group. There's also things called like lobbying days or days at the Capitol or days of action. And I definitely recommend getting involved with those, finding organizations that are hosting those that relate to your social impact or the causes that you care about, because they're a great way to kind of get your foot in the door, what advocacy is, how to legislate over specific topics or in support or against just different bills. They have, talking points and training days specific to those kinds of things. And then finally, for state action ideas, each governor usually has some kind of council or committee over various topics, and they can kind of make and appoint those willy-nilly. And there's a whole process to it, I'm sure, but there's various councils on different permits or, on innovation or fitness or, there's tons of things that governors councils can you can be appointed to, and there's lists and lists of them on each governmental website. So maybe serving on a task force or on a committee is something that interests you for advocacy work. Definitely look through those and figure out what the appointment process is, because likely you're very qualified as a young person, an advocate, and change maker to sit on that committee. And they probably want to hear your voice and hear your opinion and hear you as a representative. So definitely check out different governors, councils, committees, and appointment processes so that you can get connected and make change at the state level. And then finally, federal. That's the flashy part, right? But every little piece builds up. And like I said before, local and state is where a lot of change can get made. But federal is really cool. Federal, a lot of stuff can be done nationally that is really important and makes a lot of waves and forward momentum. So part of that is knowing who your senators are, knowing who your representatives are. Again, find out who those contact names and email addresses, and find out what roles your senators and representatives have. What kind of leadership do they have over congressional committees? Are you passionate about education and you happen to have a senator who's the committee chairperson for the education committee in the Senate? Or is someone sitting on a committee for gerrymandering and you're really passionate about voters' rights? Like how can you connect with your representative to make change and combine on a value that you want to make an impact in, and they want to make an impact in because they're sitting on that committee. Again, federal groups all the time are hosting days of action, and there's national groups that you can align your social impact with if you're not already. Definitely recommend finding national organizations that ideally have a local presence or a chapter near you so that you can engage in advocacy on all local, state, and federal levels. I also added a link over here that is, you can stay up to date on bills being presented to our US Congress and set up alerts to say, I would like to hear all the things about women's rights. I would like to hear all the bills being presented that are relating to that because I'm super passionate about it. And you can sign up for email newsletters. Even I signed up for both of the senators' newsletters here in Kansas. So both of my senators have newsletters that they send out usually about every week, every other week. And it just helps me stay up to date on what they're involved in. And when they travel to DC and back home from DC when they're on recess or something. So if I'm interested in setting up a meeting, I know they may be a little closer to home. Might be easier for me to travel to see them, to set up a meeting, to coordinate our schedules. When it does come to setting up congressional meetings, plan ample time, plan so much time, because they're busy people. We are busy people. Make sure you're planning enough time to meet with them, but don't think it's impossible, because it's not. It's their job for them to listen to constituents, and you're a constituent who's got a great voice that wants to share and make an impact. So plan ample time and set up meetings, and all it takes is an email. I know I've said that like 8 times, but they love hearing from constituents. So they're going to be really excited to hear from you. Also plan events around recess. I know I just said it makes it a little easier to travel. I think we have a DC representative here on the call, so ignore the travel part of this conversation for you. But for those of us who aren't able to travel distances, or maybe just can't afford flights or COVID or all the all the things that come along with travel, right? There's recesses in Congress, and not just US Congress, but state legislatures. And you can connect in more, I don't want to say natural, let's say more localized ways with those representatives, because you're at home and it's their home too. And you can connect in various ways during their recesses, and they're a little bit easier to catch and get a hold of and start building that relationship with, so that when you go to say, hey, I want to sit on a committee, or hey, I think we should propose this bill, or hey, I'd love a Senate resolution or a governor's proclamation, that you've formed that relationship with them, and they're like, yeah, I absolutely want to support you in the things that you're doing. So that was the quick and dirty. I told you I'd keep it pretty short so that we could all get to bed. But what kind of thoughts do you have? What kind of questions do you have? What kind of things were you thinking as you were going that you absolutely want to share, or just have a question that you need answered?
So more brainstorming question side of it. So my social impact has to do with a nonprofit that I run the DC chapter for, that my friend started when we were in high school, and it's Princesses Against Cancer. So essentially we literally dress up as Disney princesses, and we like volunteer in hospitals and like women's shelters and children's shelters and things like that. Just like bring some joy to them. But on the advocacy side of it, I feel like I would be doing more like pediatric cancer research funding. And so I was just wondering how, like, I feel as though that's something that's like basically only on a federal level, or like what sort of like proclamation or something like on a county or like on a city level do you think? Obviously my
Yeah,
situation is weird because we don't have a state government, but
sure. I think in my experience, because I deal with STEAM education, so science things, computer science things, education, and engineering stuff
yeah,
is usually highly regulated.
yeah,
So I kind of interact with something very similar. My recommendation, and something that I say pretty often, is advocacy isn't just advocacy, it's education, right? So with proclamations, you can use those as awareness opportunities to say, like, hey, no one knows the severity of these pediatric cancer numbers that we're experiencing right now. And no one knows the story of these children that are going through this. And they don't know the survival rates that we want to highlight, right? They don't know about the positive changes being made. This is your chance to write a whole proclamation and say, today is Pediatric Cancer Survivors Day. Here's some really great stats, or however you want to write it. But I would say don't totally think of it as hard regulation. I think that's really hard. I think about government like regulation often, but thinking about it as an education opportunity and just reframing it slightly to say, how can I use this as an awareness platform too?
okay, gotcha. Okay, great, thank you.
No problem. Any other thoughts? It can be totally like social impact specific, or maybe geographically specific. I don't know.
Do you have any tips for like Zoom hearings rather than just, I mean, DC's very like very, very, very shut down still. And I honestly don't see that ever changing. So all of our like council member hearings and stuff have been virtual. And I know that you can sign up in advance to do Zoom testimony and stuff, but is there like any tips that you have for it specifically being like virtual rather than in person?
Yeah, I actually have kind of two things. And one is it could be used both virtual and in person. Also, I'll start with that. When you provide written testimony and you have the chance to give it verbally, either in person or virtual, I would recommend kind of writing two testimonies, right? So you have your written testimony that you submit, that they're going to read, it's on record, they're going to hear it, or they're going to read it and synthesize that information and form opinions on it. And then they have the chance to hear your testimony, your verbal testimony, whether that is in person or virtual. You have the chance, obviously not to change your stance. Hopefully you're consistent supporting this or opposing whatever it is. But you can change it up. You can add flavor. I actually just last Tuesday presented virtually for a hearing, which I had never done it virtually before. And so I was like totally freaked out because I was like, what's going to happen? And then, of course, the worst happened. My microphone didn't work and I was the problem child technologically. All that aside, there's a chance to share more of your story, more of that why are you advocating for it? Share feedback that you've gotten from other constituents. That's something that I did when I posted originally that I was going to provide my written testimony. I got feedback from various individuals, both in my, age demographic and in my industry and things. And so for the verbal testimony, I was able to provide their words and share what they've given to say, like, this was the feedback that other people have that I didn't get to write in my written testimony that I want to share with you today. So that's kind of the first piece. The second piece is to be patient and prepared because accidents happen, technological glitches happen. You can have your testimony or your second testimony, whatever, written up and on the side of the screen. That's something that I think is an absolute asset to virtual versus in person. I feel like you get to be a little bit more prepared. But I think they're a little more chaotic, and I think you have to be flexible and gracious when it comes to that. So being in the right headspace to give a virtual testimony, I think is very important, which isn't totally an advocacy best practice. It's just kind of a Zoom presentation best practice. But that is one thing that I think is really important because it can be hard. It can be challenging. You don't know when. Sometimes when you sign up, you don't know what order you're going to be giving testimony in. You could have a technological glitch and you get to go at the end, but there's so many variables that come in and so many questions that can be asked virtually. And because you are tuning in, sometimes that also gives you the chance to be like, oh, I had a stat that I was really excited to share and I don't remember what it is. Let me Google it real fast. There's some more opportunity there, and don't feel bad if you have to do that. You are a professional, but you're not a professional testimony giver, right? And they know that, and they have grace for that. So don't beat yourself up. Be confident. Look things up if you need to. Read off your notes if you need to, and just be flexible. Cool.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, things to think?
I just want to say you're great for putting this together, and I've enjoyed hearing your insight because I literally had no idea where to start or any ideas that I had, but I written a lot of things down that I think that I can do because of this. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. And feel free, I'm actually going to share my screen one more time. Feel free to connect with me and share your advocacy wins and DM me for questions that you may come up. Be like, hey, I need someone to proofread this email before I send it to my county commissioner. I am 1,000% happy to do that. I want to know about the things that you're doing. So I'm so excited that you are all here or tuning in afterward. So thank you so much for this. And I think we can wrap it up and go to bed now.